honest, my instinct at the moment definitely says, think about your life design. Not everybody who's, a senior executive in marketing set out to say, I want to be a marketeer, but they can be very successful at doing that.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode from the Leadership Blueprint. Thanks so much for joining us today. I just want to say right at the start, please do like and subscribe to the channel. It just helps us reach more like-minded individuals and help get this content out there to share with everybody. So thanks a lot for joining us. So today, really excited, we're joined by Hammad Khan, a seasoned professional who's worked with the likes of EY, Accenture, recently was the managing director at Wipro. He's also been a lecturer for the Institute of Design and Innovation, and also recently has embarked on his own entrepreneurial adventure, and he's now the founder of LYFE, which I'll let him explain to you in a little bit more detail as we go through today. So let me just start by saying, thanks very much for joining us today, Hammad. Really excited to explore some of the themes around business change, leadership transformation, innovation, and how those have shaped your career today. So thanks very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Oliver. Nice to speak to you as well and have this conversation. Looking forward to it.
Great stuff. So let's start from the beginning then. Obviously Nottingham in the UK, for people that aren't aware of that, to Dubai. How did that shape your career? How did that sort of happen? Let's start with that point and move forward. So yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. From Nottingham to currently Dubai, a few short hops in between, I guess. But it's my hometown. I tend to always contextualize it also as the home of Robin Hood, because it's the easiest way for everyone to recognize where Nottingham might have its place in the world. So yeah, that was where I was born and raised. So my parents were settled there from back in the 70s. But then, my journey was kind of shaped, as with most people, in my hometown. And, as you've alluded to, I've spent most of my career in the design profession in one form or another. And maybe as we talk, I'll explain how that has sort of evolved into business and transformation and other things. But I guess the gestation was design, because that's pretty much how I started my career. And only now that I'm kind of, grey in the tooth and, past my 40s, and you reflect on your life, you realize how much of those sort of early experiences have shaped your whole life. And so, yeah, pretty much from my teenagers onwards, where I really got passionate about design of all sorts of things, that's really been the one thing that's stayed consistent. So, having learned and done some self-teaching of myself for design in my teenagers, I left Nottingham to go to university in Birmingham, but then didn't actually stay on in education. I spent a year at university before getting seconded into freelance work, what was at the time the emerging internet and the dot-com boom that was happening at around 1998, 99. Which gives you an idea how old I am. And then, I kind of really got sucked into that world, because it was this brilliant fusion at the time of technology and sort of technical things, which I had a passion for, and then design and experience, and this kind of new world that you could create, using digital and sort of, computer-based content, so Photoshop and illustration and media and video and animation. And so this was all quite new and emerging, and I got really sucked into that because of that fusion of tech and creativity. So did a bit of freelance work, made some money, at 18, 19, and I thought, I'm going to take a year out, make some money, and then maybe I'll go back to uni, and never did, because that world, as we know, exploded, right? And so there was no turning back from the internet once you kind of got into it at that stage. And so I moved down to London after leaving uni, and started working at what was actually a law firm that was venturing into the tech space and building online platforms for online legal services, and did that and helped them kind of build some really great sort of online products. And we were famous at the time for doing like online divorces on the cheap, because that was a new thing that you could do. So it's like you're really designing cool new services, new ways of doing things. And so went from that actually into the recruitment space, which is obviously your expertise, and worked for a large UK recruitment group to help them build their online recruitment platform. And then actually ventured out of London a little bit into Hertfordshire, working for a tech firm where we were doing work for sort of retail e-commerce. And again, we kind of, the sound bite is, we invented online home grocery shopping, right? So this is in 2000, maybe. So
Okay.
20 odd years ago. We did the platforms that were the first generation of that. So, selling your groceries online, and it actually wasn't even based on your web browser. There was a CD-ROM that you'd load the software with, and it would synchronize the basket online, and then you'd place your order. And we did that for Tesco. And it was the first version of all of that. And then it went on to becoming web-based, and we did it for Iceland and some other UK, retailers, and then even more across Europe, like the Ahold Group, and actually in the US. I spent a lot of time in the US at that time, working for groups like there was a company called Stop and Shop on the East Coast in Boston, and yeah, just really playing with retail experience tech, but from a design point of view. So I was really looking at what does that mean for users? Like, we had a lot of great technology people who made it work, but I was thinking about how do people actually use this? Think about it. Like, at that time, it hadn't been done. Now we're used to it, but at that time, it was like you'd say to people, "Oh, why don't you buy your groceries online?" And they're like, "What are you talking about? Why would I do that?" Or, "Oh, when you're in a grocery store, maybe you want to take this little gun and scan your stuff. Why would I do that? Or maybe you could pay yourself and self-checkout. Why would I do that?" So this was like all new ideas at the time. So I was kind of working on those programs and really getting into the psychology and the behavior of people, and then thinking about how do you design systems and touch points and interfaces that will facilitate how to do that. So really getting quite deep into what we now call human-centered design and user-centered design. But what I loved about it is it wasn't just online. It was always this thinking about human activity, behavior, and experience, as well as a kind of digital experience, right? So that was right. It was really sort of quite pioneering even back then. And so being able to get a bit of international exposure, working in Europe, the US, and my career just really sort of took off from these points onwards. And then after that, I went agency side, and worked at an agency in Oxford. Became a creative director at 21, which was a great milestone. And yeah, running a 200-man agency as the creative lead and working for really great brands and Formula One teams and things like that, to actually do all this kind of online digital marketing that was really exploding still. And yeah, kind of really just got into the thick of that as a sort of early career, sort of senior leader. And that's what really just hooked me into wanting to work for myself. And after a few years of doing all those things, I established my own agency at 25. And yeah, kind of continued to do things on the back of that. So yeah, a bit of a journey, just from Nottingham out to even the rest of the UK. There was a lot happening, and we can talk a bit more about the 10 years of running my own agency and doing other things before eventually making the transition to the Middle East. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, really interesting stuff. And I mean, as you've said there, running the own agency, what was although it was early in the career, what were some of the learnings that you were able to take from the businesses you had worked with into running your own agency? So you're still in your own agency working with those big brands, but now with that freedom, innovation, that ability to push the needle even further, because as you said, it's asking those questions of customers, their journey they're going on. How can we almost test them on what the possibilities are? So what were some of the key learnings you took from the corporate, together with the shackles being taken off, that helped you kind of grow your own agency even further?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really, the central thing is definitely still the idea of human-centered design or user-centered design, right? So, when you're working in these sort of project environments, or whether it's agency, whether it's with the client, whether it's a brand, a lot of people, when they work in the creative industries, they love working for a big brand. Oh, I work with McDonald's, or I worked with Nike, or I work with Apple. And what people don't realize is when you work with big brands, it's more restrictive. There's a lot more brand guidelines, there's do's and don'ts, there's expectations, there's certain ways of having to do things. So actually creative expression is quite hard. So that's one learning that you take away, is that actually it's not just about going in with a big idea and suddenly sort of taking off. That happens from time to time, but day-to-day projects and campaigns, not so much. And then the other thing is, of course, you've got products and solutions. So if you're working in tech and things like that, you've actually got solutions that you're trying to put together and fit to a brand or fit to a user audience or something. And so again, you're limited in how much sort of design expression you might have. So being able to work in that centerpiece to say, actually, my role is, let me try and understand the audience. Let me take that learning and push it back to those who are trying to push a piece of tech or who are pushing a product or pushing a brand, and try and get the empathy between that closer together to say, look, you guys need to understand more that the users and the customers have got saying this, feeling this, thinking this, but also because of what they've got in insight, why don't we adapt and change and update or put that on the future roadmap? So what happened is, starting work as a designer quite quickly became a strategic function. So that was the takeaway, is to say, actually, I'm doing this work. So actually the value that we're adding is actually the human connectivity bit. So yes, our output might be a piece of design work or a piece of technology work or a piece of campaign work, but the value is actually being created in the understanding and connection of people to organizations. And actually the disconnect that exists quite often there was a real surprise, because you don't realize actually just how difficult an organization thinking is from an individual's person's thinking. So whilst an organization is effectively just a collection of people, but it's like a hive mind, right? If you talk to someone individually, we get it. We say, oh, I hate this, I hate that, or I don't want to do self-checkout, or I hate being on a call center, on the other end of a chatbot. But yeah, it's still people who are getting that stuff out there and putting those solutions there, right? So that org thinking and individual thinking isn't always as obvious as you think. So it takes people like what I do to act as that facilitator and bring it closer together. So taking that learning is what really motivated me to start my own business, because I said, well, actually, we can do this for ourselves, right? We can actually build value and go and speak to brands or build creative solutions around this. And it just motivated me, after already being in leadership early on, to say, why not give it a go, see if we can make a success of it for ourselves. So it started out, as a wide-eyed, oh, we can solve everything. And the agency was doing brand and PR and events and physical and digital experience, and it was maybe a bit too ambitious. But as time went on over that 10 years, it became more and more focused all the time on just the consulting and strategic element of human value, human-centered design and service and experience. So we started dropping things as well. We started dropping development, we started dropping branding, and just getting more and more focused on the consulting. And that's ultimately what led me to large-scale consulting firms in the end as well. Yeah.
Just super interesting, because I think we all know the AI revolution that's going on at the minute, and I think it's those products and companies that are still able to say, how are we working with an individual to make their lives better through AI helping them, versus let's just automate a whole process and remove the person from it completely. Now, yes, there will be some processes probably where that does happen, but I think the ones that are getting a lot more traction are that integrated part. So it's really interesting to hear that you were, quite literally ahead of the curve a number of years ago. So yeah, it's super interesting. So how do we then go from your own agency in the UK, things are going well, to Dubai? What kind of made that happen? And yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's a funny one with Dubai particularly. So I guess there was a point where so my wife's family have got quite a lot of ties in Dubai. So her sister kind of invested and relocated here quite early on, so had family connections. And then her parents and things also had some business interests in Dubai. And they talk to us as a couple and say, you guys should look at Dubai and maybe you should invest there. And there's all this interesting stuff happening. And I was very much like, no, I'm not interested. It's not my thing, and leave me alone, kind of thing. And then through my own business work in the agency, we first of all got some client interest in Saudi Arabia. and got seconded out there, and actually, flew out, did some project work for some clients in Saudi, and it was a bit of an eye opener. And this is back in, I don't know, 2012 kind of period maybe. And so it was like, oh yeah, this is interesting. It was a new market. I mean, I'd done work in the States and in Europe and a little bit in Far East Asia, but never in the Middle East. So that was just an interesting new market. And it was like, okay, yeah, this has got opportunity. And I just saw lots of, potential for what we do in Saudi. And then it makes you curious about the rest of the region. And then, we visited Dubai, and actually we felt that the big value that was to be added at the time was knowledge sharing. So again, user experience, UX work, and design with a user-centered mindset, service design as another theme. It was all quite new in the UK and Europe as well, but definitely in the Middle East, it was almost like no one was doing it. So that felt like a new opportunity. We felt there was a green space, and so we started doing training courses initially in Dubai, and flying out on a kind of quarterly basis and kind of selling out training courses for UX design and service design and design thinking, facilitation, and these kind of skill sets. And yeah, got really good reception from it. We were selling out the course, making network connections, and then getting client work, of course, that on the back of that networking. And it just kind of got us hooked into the city more and said, this is got a lot of potential. So that was happening in the agency. And then kind of in parallel to that, in the UK, we also used to do a lot of work, almost subcontracting for other large agency groups like WPP and Omnicom, and a lot of the large brand and comms agencies who again were still building up capability around that. So they found us as a boutique specialist, and we'd come in either as a team to train and build or as a delivery team to do the work. And so in one of those firms that we were partnering with was a firm called Seren, which is again a specialist kind of customer experience and an innovation firm. And we started doing some work together in the UK, but also eventually in Saudi. So that again was kind of showing us this traction to the Middle East, and we were spending like a lot of time in the Middle East doing this sort of work, but based out of the UK. So a lot of flying in and out on rotation. And then eventually we kind of acqui-hired and merged our business in with Seren. And then shortly after that, Seren was acquired by EY in the UK. So they kind of took the whole firm on, and by this firm it was a pretty large firm, 100+ people, and became part of EY in the UK. But they also asked to set up a kind of splinter unit of that for EY in the Middle East. So that was kind of part of the journey, is because I'd been leading a lot of the Middle East work already for both myself and within Seren. They said, right, Hammad, would you relocate to Dubai and set that practice up for us in the Middle East? So that's what happened. So it was a kind of full relocation post acquisition in 2015. And then, yeah, I spent about four years or so in the kind of EY leadership team, kind of building out what it means to do design-led consulting and innovation work in a large management consultancy. So rather than it being boutiques or design specialist firms or broad and big agency groups, it was almost a completely new world. And the reason for that acquisition, just to close that point, was we were doing very large consulting and transformative work by this point around customer experience and innovation. And the management consultancies had increasingly found that they were losing ground to firms like that. They kind of never saw it coming, because of course they go through transformation and strategy point projects using the frameworks that had been established in business school thinking. But what was happening is, design school or D school thinking, and was starting to become more apparent, and working in the methods of design thinking and human-centered design was actually attractive to large corporates wanting to do transformation. And so that's why there was this big flurry of acquisitions where big consulting groups started buying out design groups, and it was because we were effectively eating into their pie. And so a lot of that has kind of worked itself out, and most of the big design groups have become part of a large consulting group. And I guess over that after a decade of doing that in the UK, I've spent the last decade in the Middle East with those firms, either pre or post acquisition, to actually figure out how do you do design-led consulting, within this type of large consulting business construct.
Did that lead to some frustration initially in terms of we're going back to our bit more nimble, bit more able to be very customer focused, and then you're going into someone that they've acquired you, they're much bigger, they kind of don't know what you're bringing to the table, but they know they need it. Was it an exciting journey to impart your knowledge for them, or was there a lot of resistive change that you had to work with them to kind of explain and teach, or some sort of balance in between? I think that would be super interesting to see. You know, they've acquired you because you're bringing something to them, but probably some of that's going to make it harder for you to do your job in the first place as well. So how did that kind of play out in the end?
Yeah, no, you've definitely hit the nail on the head as to where the sort of challenge space was. So you're effectively dealing with two things, right? You do what you do, and now you're in a new place with a new market opportunity to do that. So that's the dynamic between you as a profession and as a skill, and the client market who needs it. But then you've got a second facet, as you've said, which is the internal organization. How do you fit in? What are you bringing versus what do they already do? Do they complement? Do they conflict? Do they, compound and add value to each other? So just navigating that is definitely, where the big challenge statement was. And all the design firms, who have been through this sort of acquisition have been through that same pain. And whether it was Seren into EY, whether it was Fjord into Accenture, whether it was Design It into Wipro, and I've seen so many, Frog into Capgemini, and there's lots of these and I've worked with so many of them. And so I've seen that same challenge in different versions. And of course, there's similarities as well as some sort of unique, instances. But I guess in the first instance, it's great because as an inbound acquisition, there's often this kind of new shiny toy effect, and you're new teams or new people, and you've got new ways of working, you've got tools, methods, and culture to bring. And typically, you're not to be sort of arrogant about it, but design teams tend to kind of be quite young, fun, and we do things in a particular way, and we do tend to bring a bit of creative energy to the workspaces and teams that we're part of. And so we're just making the workspace nicer, building design agencies and innovation studios, and other people are getting a chance to get involved in that, right? And so everyone kind of gets quite excited with it. So definitely there's a honeymoon period when this happens, and that's good for everyone. It's good for the business we've just joined because they're learning new things, they're seeing new people, and they're evolving their way of doing things. It's good for the clients because there's a new value that they're able to get access to, and a new story and a new sort of type and profile of people. And it's good for us because we're also having to be challenged to say, hey, maybe you've done it and you think design and creativity is what you do, but guess what? There's value being created through smart business thinking and people who are great at finance and strategy management and people who are HR specialists and all of these other sort of areas that we're not professionals in, but we're exposed to by doing design-led transformation. So I found that the tension lies more just down to attitude, right? And some of the people that over the years I've seen in those teams, you definitely get those who are very resistant, like, no, I design and business don't need to, you do the business bit, I'll do the design bit. And that's obviously more frictionless. And then you've got people who are putting pressure on the design team going, guys, you need to open your mind. You need to be more commercial. You've got to be more realistic. You've got to realize this is a charging business. And they're kind of putting tension on the designers to step up into a consulting kind of thinking, and so some people handle that better than others, right? So you start to realize quite quickly that the distinction within these firms is now going to come down more to those people who are more probably career motivated, more open-minded to learning new skills, and also more ambitious in going, I'm still maybe going to stay rooted in my principles and purpose around design or creativity and that kind of way of working, but maybe by adapting and learning what I do more in a business centric environment allows me to grow. And so those tensions definitely fall out when you see people leave. They're like, oh no, we're no longer what we were, and things have changed, and they can't last in in the consulting space, and then you've got those who adapt and go on and do very well at it. But yeah, definitely where the fun lies of the sort of integration challenge, and that I guess is what in the end has become my story, right? Is doing that over and over again. Kind of done it four or five times over now. Is gone into a large consulting, firm and helped them set that up, because each time I've obviously learned something, and I can bring that back into a firm who needs to do that. So in the end, I've ended up being a kind of serial capability builder, I guess.
Well, I was going to say also probably a serial storyteller, in terms of we've been here, we've seen this journey before.
Yeah.
These are the experiences. Yes, I'm bringing my experience, but my experience is not just my knowledge. It's also my experience of what has and hasn't worked in the past.
Yeah.
Are there like 2 or 3 key strategies that you've seen help break down some of that resistance with people? Or is it all just case by case basis?
I don't know if these are kind of definite rules, but for sure there's been consistency, right, in terms of what works and what doesn't. I mean, there was a big trend, for example, around innovation labs, and that ended up becoming more frictionless than valuable, right? So on the one hand, you had design teams saying, hey, when it comes to creating, creative and collaborative workspaces, and the tools and methods of how you use that space, that's us, right? We own that, we do that, because it's a creative capability. And then technical or business teams go, no, we're in charge of that, so we will do it. So you get sort of areas of work like that where there's a big tension, where teams are saying, no, we do it, and others saying, no, we do it. And what ends up happening is it ends up becoming an ivory tower. So actually it just doesn't work at all. Because even if the political fight means team A did it and team A didn't, the result ends up being the culture broke down for the client, because you ended up building a kind of ivory tower scenario where it was like, oh no, you only use it this way, or you fill it with these people, or you put it in a different building because it's new and different, or you change your entire office to build it around it because it's a new disruptive way of thinking. So actually, that was an interesting one over kind of a 5-6 year period where we saw a big proliferation of that type of work. But actually, the learning on the back of it was actually it doesn't work very well, and it's often not very successful for anybody. It just ended up being a service we sold for a lot of money. So there's a few things like that where you have to be honest about what worked and what didn't. And then it's the same again with different forms of digital transformation, which was obviously a big wave, and product design and UX around apps and things. And how do you work on strategy projects that are about apps and digital services versus, actually doing good product design and user experience work. And again, so these are different sort of challenge and tension areas. And as you mentioned earlier, we're seeing it around AI now, right? But for people like myself, we don't see it differently to the previous tech waves and hype cycles, right? Because the center of gravity is still human-centered design. So whether it was 10 years ago, learning and having to figure out what does social mean for business, 10, 15 years ago, people were like, I don't need a social media manager. We don't need a page on Facebook. Why would we have a Twitter account, right? And now, your entire marketing department is full of people on social media, and you almost don't do anything else. So, these cycles come and go, but certainly what I do, you don't change your philosophy. It's about humans, people, behaviors, and experiences, and you're just using and adapting and leveraging the concepts of tech, business, strategy, AI, and design to get the job done. Super
interesting. So with some of the transformation projects that you did whilst in Dubai and Saudi, if you look for specifically at the Saudi Tourism Authority work that you did, was there a fundamental difference in the way you had to approach the government-led work? Did they have a very different mindset because they weren't looking from a company, they were looking from a country perspective, and they were coming at it from just a very different angle? Was that something which it'd be just interesting to understand how did that play out, and were there significantly different challenges, or did it pretty much run down the same sort of things that we've discussed so far?
Yeah, it's a good question, and look, I think yourself and others who know the Middle East in particular will probably resonate when I say, actually, the government is often the biggest and most open-minded pioneer for innovation and open thinking, which is often not the case, especially, in markets where we have come from, such as the UK and Europe and North America. Not to say that their government, entities don't have innovation and open-minded thinking, but it's certainly not what they're reputationally known for. Whereas definitely in the Middle East, it's reputationally there. It's to say, it's fast growing, it's ambitious, it invests in futuristic thinking and, innovative ways of working. And so, yeah, what you find is, when you've been trading on innovation as a service, if you like, and as a culture of working, and you're doing that for high-tech startups and, product firms and experiences, that's actually what government wants by the time they get around to doing that type of work. They're saying, we recognize that, design thinking and innovation management and digital transformation and customer experience is the thing. And so now we're building a tourism, economy. That's what we want to base it on, is the thinking and the principles that have been successful there. We're not going to build a tourism economy on the back of legacy thinking, or on the back of, mandarins and government bureaucracy. No, we're going to say, our experience economy is going to be based on experiences, right? So, that's actually the reason I fell into it, is because they pulled people like us into it. So, when I was at EY, I led a really big piece of strategy work for one of the big Saudi giga projects. And, we used concepts like purpose-led strategy and, customer experience and, sort of innovation and culture building in order to work with architects and master planners for an entire island and an entire new region and on the Red Sea, right? That's not how you would have normally done that. You'd have said only architects do architecture work and only strategists do the strategy, right? And actually it was my design-led team who said, no, we're in the center, and then we will coordinate the architecture work and the strategy work and the financial feasibility work and the market fit. And that's what they did. And that the work that we did and the reputation of that is what came full circle back to, you mentioned Saudi Tourism Authority. They asked me to say, look, we're building obviously our national level visitor experience team and projects. Can you come and lead that for us, right? So I joined them and yeah, did the same thing that I did for the consulting firms, which is hire a team, build a capability, set up the tools and ways of working, and then actually put those into practice on, how do we transform and change that region? How do we attract and deliver experiences for 10 and 20 and 30 and 50 million more visitors coming into the country, and all of these different amazing opportunities. So government was actually, to your question, the most open-minded, right? They want to adopt this more than anyone, and whether that was Saudi Arabia or in the UAE, I found that to be the attitude for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. And so how have we what have you then taken forward into LYFE? Obviously, this is your new baby, and I'm going to let you tell us a little bit more about this in a moment. What kind of made you say, okay, I want to take a step back? I've gone through some of these growth acquisitions. I've been a part of these journeys. I've done my own thing. I've done the big corporate. Now I want to go and do LYFE. What was the thinking? What was the gap? What was the problem that you felt, this is what I'm trying to solve? And just enlighten us a little bit more around that piece.
Sure. Look, I hope it all makes sense to you and also anyone who's listening and watching this. When I say, in the end, everything has remained and also is connected by this whole idea of human centricity, right? So from right back in what I didn't realize at the time, but right back in Nottingham in my early career and teens through to now in my 40s, the hop, skip and a jump internationally, and hop, skip and a jump from agency to startup to my own business to consulting, I personally feel I'm still focused on the same thing, which is I'm focused on how do you design the best possible experience for people, So I might have applied it in different places and environments, but that's what I'm still trying to do. And when I started reflecting on a lot of that, certainly during COVID, like a lot of us did, had a kind of existential crisis. Who am I? What am I doing? Where do I want to go? But then also even more recently, again, reflecting after, working still in industry and saying, how do I kind of build my legacy, and what is the kind of impact of the work I've done? And a lot of people have always been encouraging me to write a book. I mean, I do a lot of podcasts or event talking and conferences. I enjoy that kind of platform, but people have said, you should write more and you should do a book and things. So all of this is building over time. And I've said, right, I'm actually going to do it. But then to your point about LifeX, what I've been doing inadvertently, certainly the last 10 years, is all the things I do and learn, I've kind of been codifying it to say, well, actually, look, this is a really great way to think about figuring out and working with people to establish purpose. Well, this is a great way to understand how to, build empathy between audiences. Or this is a great way to find how you build a meaningful or a kind of moment of wow into somebody's day-to-day journey. And so I've kind of got this ongoing repository and library of things that you do. And so the insight from it all is, look, if you do that for brands, businesses, governments, why can't you do that for any individual person? Because we can design product, places, and services, but actually you could design your life. And that's really what LifeX is about, is it's a design thinking system for your own life. It's a methodology and a playbook and a kind of series of tools and techniques based on everything I've done in consulting, in academia, of teaching this kind of stuff, psychology, of working on the kind of human-centric nature of things, and said all of that in an integrated way can be applied to individual people's life as a methodology for life design. And so what I did to kind of formalize that is I recently just finished an MBA with Warwick Business School. I was fortunate enough that they actually granted me a scholarship and were very welcoming to me at the business school, despite me being, a university dropout originally, right? So I came back into academia in my 40s, having learnt it and been in leadership and everything. And they said, actually, your story's got something interesting there. And I ended up specializing my modules and my dissertation of the MBA onto life design. So, modules on things like the economics of happiness and, luxury branding, and leadership and, coaching, and finalized with a dissertation where I've specifically researched life design and found that, actually, even though I've had that idea or I'm doing it in the coaching and mentoring work that I do, it's not really amplified as much as I thought it had done still. And so I finally decided to put a name and a brand to it. And all of these, what I call design canvases, are kind of worksheets effectively that really just simplify it and allow you to just dive in without having to do all the research and academic thinking, and say, actually, I'm trying to understand my personality, my persona, and understand myself better. Well, guess what? We have tools and methods for that. And then once I've got that, I might be thinking about what my purpose is or what my goals and kind of future outlook could be. Guess what? There's tools and methods for that. You mentioned storytelling. We use that a lot to say, actually, there's storytelling and storycraft methodologies to help you figure out your journeys, right? Life paths. You could envisage that and map that out using customer experience and journey thinking. And then you can use things like, measurement and frameworks around impact and sustainability and things around agile and iterative testing to play out life experiences in a new way. So actually all the ways that we do things at work can actually be done to kind of create a system for life as well. And that's basically what LifeX is all about. So I'm writing about it, I'm blogging about it, and mentoring and coaching people with it now, and just trying to give back basically everything I've learned and hopefully find a way that it makes sense for other people to use.
I mean, that's great. And it goes back, I think, to your earlier points on empathy. I think it goes back to the acknowledgement from the MBA to say, you've got a very interesting story and an interesting angle to tell. And I think it is great, that whole kind of, there's a business there, but it's still a little bit philanthropic in terms of, I want to give back. And I mean, that there's always something nice about that. So that's really cool. So If you were to then say to people, you know, your journey might be a little bit different to others in terms of, you said, you know, the university dropout and things, what kind of advice would you give to people, whether they've dropped out or not, etc., but from a self-taught perspective? Let's go with that. You know, you knew the path you wanted to go, and then you've taught yourself along the way, and then you've learned from that. What would you say are some of the advice you would give to people that are at that point of, maybe they're at the start of their journey, maybe they're halfway through it, but they're sort of learning that self-taught design, that question piece to say, how do I push this further? What are some of the learnings or advice that you could give to people around that?
Yeah, sure. A good one. And I work with this question a lot when it comes to things like coaching, mentoring, and life design, right? Because you see a lot of stuff at a soundbite level. Like people will say, do what you love. You know, and like it's an easy statement. It's a very throwaway piece of advice that you can give, right? Just do what you love and everything else will work itself out. And there's definitely some truth in there. And that's why it's such a catchy statement. But if I was to give actual advice around it, as I often have to or get asked to do, you've got to just build on that statement a little bit, basically, is what I would say, is to say, look, definitely find things that you are interested in, you're passionate about, you have maybe some early or even, you know, great level of talent for, or certainly don't worry if your talent isn't quite there yet, but it's definitely an area that you feel as though it needs to be part of your life. Now, the question is, can you make that your profession, your vocation, or, you know, something that is more than just, you know, a hobby or an interest area? And you have to explore that with a little bit more discipline and maturity. That's really where the advice bit kicks in. So just saying blindly follow your passion or do what you love isn't great advice, I find, because it can lead people astray, especially young people who are looking for guidance. What I find is, you know, when you develop things like purpose, you know, it's great to work with more sort of profound concepts like ikigai, you know, the sort of Japanese philosophies, which, you know, help you realize that it's not just about you and what you do, but actually you need to figure out your place in the world, because that gets you to think about how do you then take that self-taught or even taught to you skill set, but think of it in terms of, well, what value is that going to have in the world? You know, does that add value either to people near me or around me in my community? Does that add value to the, you know, an industry, or does it, you know, help solve a problem? You know, if it's not solving a problem, does it just create opportunity? You know, does it create connections amongst people? You know, and so when you start to think of yourself in a more systematic way, your place in the world and the value you bring, that helps to sort of, you know, focus your skill set, whether it's taught or self-taught, to say, this is where I'm going to invest my time and energy. Because it's fine. Maybe your career isn't where your passion lies, right? Not everybody who's, you know, a senior executive in marketing set out to say, I want to be a marketeer, but they can be very successful at doing that, you know. But finding your place in the world and how it fits together, I think, is more important. Because if you're a marketeer, and I use that as an example, you know, you may find meaning in that because you're working with brands that you have passion for, or you're working in an agency that has a market share in a community that you're connected to, or that you want to learn about, you know, or that, you know, is growing and has opportunity. So it's finding those connection points is what I find is a bit more inspiring and has a bit more momentum behind it than just follow your passion. You know, that would be my real advice, is go beyond and start thinking about your place in the world.
And I mean, that's a really solid piece of advice. And, you know, we've spoke about this before. You know, I was originally a mechanical engineer with the Ministry of Defence. I then get into HR, consulting, etc. And, you know, my side thing is we have a side business of photography. You know, so it's part of my passion is photography, and we do some of that as well. So I mean, there is a lot of part there being passion, but also where does that fit into your purpose? I think it's a really good bit of advice. You know, you can have those passions, but are they your purpose as well? So it's getting that balance. So no, that's really great advice.
Yeah.
So for you then, what do you think is I suppose going back to the customer centric side of things. Where do you see the future lying then? We've talked a little bit about AI. We've talked about it still needs to be customer centric, but do you see, what do you think are over the next 5-10 years going to be the big changes within this? And yes, still needs to be a similar approach, and we've said that from start of your career to now. But maybe changing the question slightly, what do you think are going to be some of the problems or challenges that you're going to be trying to then answer? That might be a better way to answer this. What do you see as some of those horizon changes within society or within individuals that this could be used to help further?
Okay. Look, I definitely think there's going to be an increasing amount of industry and commercial solutions being pushed at the public, and a kind of ongoing discomfort or friction with how you connect with that. So let's use AI as the example. So there will inevitably be more and more AI-centric products, tools, services, and touch points that we're exposed to, right? So everything from chat bots and customer service to automated processes to talking and using your phone and new devices that are AI powered, whether it's voice or chat or text or even predictive, and giving and doing things for you because of the intelligence that tech can give. We still have, if you talk to people at an individual level, big concerns around privacy, around data, around exposure of information, around the relevance of some of these services. Everyone's like, I don't like this. And we mentioned it even earlier, 10 years ago. We were talking about it. I don't want to talk to a chatbot. I don't want an automated process. I don't want to be hanging on the end of. I want to talk to a human. So we still have that. We can talk to pretty much everybody we know. Nobody will vote for saying, yeah, that's fine. Just give me a chatbot. Problem solved. Or okay, replace everything with AI, and I'm sure it will be better. So the friction still remains between what is coming downstream more and more from industry and what people want, what people enjoy, what they will advocate for, and therefore what they will use and engage with further. So I think the challenge is not going to be convincing people that, oh no, AI or tech needs to be more human-centric. Sure, whether you agree it does or not. For people like myself, it's definitely still a big opportunity to say, for brands who want to create a better connectivity, they'll need people like us to work with them, right, and help figure that out and make it more human-centric and make it more relevant. And there'll be those who don't, and they'll just say, we've got a solution and we're selling it. So the opportunity is still about figuring out where will impact come from, because impact will come most from where people adopt, use, and advocate for it most. So if the solutions
and pay for it,
and pay for it, right? Exactly, right. Well, because if it's the technology that resonates most, that's where people will use it most. That's still my belief. So I think that's still going to be a big opportunity for people to think about. Is where does AI, as the example, fit into their life? And it can be about enhancing and learning and developing their skills and roles, or it can just be about making their life easier around themselves, right? But I just think when you think about how much technology is continuing to assist, disrupt, and enhance our lives, yet at the same time, we're more emotionally cognizant. EQ is an increasingly important topic. We talk even at a young student and an emerging academic level would say we need to think in new ways, and our human characteristics is what differentiates us from tech. And even just we mentioned earlier about having profound thinking around who am I, what do I want from life, what's the meaning of life, why do I need work-life balance, what does working from home mean? So our human instincts are increasingly more important, yet our technology exposure is increasingly high. So it doesn't take a lot to realize there's a friction there, a big friction, right? So working at the intersection of that friction is basically, I think, where the opportunity of value creation still lies. That's it.
No, I mean that's fantastic, and it's even within our business, we're using AI or automation to move it to the next human interaction. We're trying to make somebody's a mundane part of a role more value add. Sorry, allowing people to focus on the value add. We're not trying to remove them from that process. So we're trying to actually give people more time by not being bogged down in some of the less impactful things. So yeah, I think you're right. It's very much that kind of, it'd be a very interesting balance, and there is definitely that friction. So taking that balance, taking that friction, you know, moving towards kind of the end of today, what might be your 2-3 sort of takeaway sound bites, bits of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs or aspiring leaders? So it could be the leader or the entrepreneur. There might be slight differences, and then please make the distinction if so. But what might be some of those kind of advices that you could say, if I knew this, or reflecting back on my career, A, B, C have really been just great things to help me think on and grow and focus on to achieve more? What might those be?
Okay, sure. I don't know. I mean, at the risk of being a little bit biased, my instinct at the moment definitely says, think about your life design, right? Because, and I don't say that just because of what I'm doing, but the reason I do it and the reason I think it fits for people is because pretty much what I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, right? Which is we live in this world of duality now where we no longer our profession. There was a time for sure where people like, right, you're a plumber. That pretty much just defines you, right? Or you're an electrician, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer. So your profession or your industry or your role with your primary characteristic now, and increasingly, I think in the future, we will be less defined by that. It will be, I happen to work in plumbing, or I happen to be a leader in industry, I happen to be an entrepreneur, but there's more to me. So actually what we're finding is, as individuals, we need to be more cognizant of how to manage that duality. We used to call it work-life balance. Even that's not a great description anymore. It's more about thinking, how much time and energy, and also therefore support, have I got to help me understand, plan, and live and shape my life as a whole? And also the same in my work, my profession, or my interests and endeavors. It could be businesses, it could be side ventures, it could be hobbies, but basically your applied kind of talent and interest level, right? So actually being able to understand and facilitate those two things is where I would give advice for it, is to say, whether you use a life design system, whether you look at life coaching, whether you develop your EQ, whether you, I mean, there's lots of ways you can do it, but I would say my advice to whether you're young, middle-aged, or, you know, even a senior point in your career and life, be more cognizant in your time split between managing those two things, and put dedicated effort in saying what systems, frameworks, or kind of habit routines can you set up to say, actually, I've got a grasp of it and I'm able to work in a more harmonious way with it. Because that's where people end up finding over time, they've now developed a problem that needs a fix. So if you're young and all you're focused on in your career, and then by the time you're kind of middle-aged, you're like, hey, you know what? I've been successful, but guess what? I've missed out on other parts of my life. Maybe I didn't find a life partner, or I started a family too late, or I didn't travel when I was younger. And because, you know, you were only focused on one lens, you know, or the other way around. Oh, I enjoyed my youth, but now I'm 30, 40, I'm struggling to buy a house, and I don't know how I'm going to kind of get on the property ladder. So I think holistic thinking and balanced understanding of what life journeys really consist of is what I would really advocate for now, is for people to get a grasp of that. So whether it's late stage or early stage, doesn't matter. Figure it out from this point and figure out what is really, you know, possible for you, so that it's in your control of your life design, and therefore you'll reach out in whichever way of support you need: career support, personal support, emotional support. I hope that answers the question.
No, I think that's perfect, and it is very much there, like you said, just getting that balance right. And you know, if you're focused just on one area, you may not have the fulfillment in other pieces. And so, you know, to be overall happiness overall, it is looking at multiple areas. And you know, even on a personal note, I can see that over, you know, if I reflect back, you know, 5-10 years, I was probably focusing on one thing maybe 10 plus years ago, and I think no one's perfect, but I think I've done a bit better at sort of getting that balance over the previous years. And I can see that has been by taking back some time. It has been by dedicating certain other things. It has been doing the photography thing on the side. It has been getting that balance in different ways. So no, I think it's a really great piece of advice for people there.
So.
In terms of today, you know, could definitely talk to you for ages. It's been really fascinating, but we'll start to wrap things up. So, you know, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining us today. I think it's been really insightful. I think there's some great takeaways here. I think it'd be really good just to let people know where can they find a bit more information about LYFE if this has sort of resonated with them and they want to reach out. Do they contact you directly? Do they leave a comment? Do they, you know, is there a website? You know, happy to, in fact, what we'll do, we'll put in the comments section of this video as well, details on how to contact you, but of course they can look you up on LinkedIn. Is there any other way that they should reach out or anything like that?
Sure. Well, again, first of all, thanks, Oliver. It's been fun, and you know, your questioning has been really sort of thought-provoking and makes me have to think about, you know, how some of that comes together. So I hope that was useful for anyone listening and yourself. But no, enjoyed the chat immensely. And as you say, I'm sure we will continue to chat offline again on other things. So that's really good. But no, I'm happy for people to reach out to me. I'll keep it simple. Definitely, you can find me on LinkedIn, and then we can go from there. But you know, LYFEX is spelled LYFEX, with the Y in the life, and the X representing the kind of variables of your life experience. But I mean, I'm on most of the social channels for that, so you can put in LYFEX into you know, into the X platform, into Instagram and YouTube are probably the best two places, because there's more and more video content on there. And on LinkedIn and things, you'll find the articles and the blogs and the bios. And it kind of all overlaps, and if you connect with any of those places, you'll find out more about what I'm doing, because I'm just trying to publish more of the thinking around it, and there'll be courses and events and other ways that you can get involved and actually get hold of the design canvases themselves as well. And in due course, there'll be a book. So yeah, follow LYFEX, and happy for anyone to just get in touch around that. But thank you again for our chat. Really enjoyed it, and look forward to doing it again.
No problem. Thank you so much again for your time. Have a great day, and everyone will catch you on the next episode. Please do like and subscribe, and thanks a lot for your time. Thank you.